You know, it is a very specific, and I mean a very modern type of frustration.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Like you spend months analyzing markets, right?
Yeah.
You're staying up late, just watching endless YouTube walkthroughs on how to underwrite properties.
Right, right. Doing the homework.
Exactly. And you've somehow managed to build a reliable network of contractors, which honestly is a miracle in itself.
It really
So
is.
you've got the toolkit completely ready. You're perfectly positioned at the starting line.
But then you are completely stuck at the final hurdle.
Yes.
Because, knowing how to do a deal doesn't magically put the cash in your bank account to actually fund it.
Right. That is the ultimate roadblock, just funding that very first deal. Or maybe you actually have closed deals in the past, but life happened, you took a break, and suddenly you discover that traditional lenders, they only count experience within the last 3 years.
Yeah, that 3-year window is brutal.
It is. On paper, your entire track record just vanishes. You are basically back at square one.
It is incredibly common, honestly. I mean, traditional banking is highly cyclical. Lenders, they want to know you can survive the current market conditions, not the market conditions from like 5 years ago.
Makes sense.
But that logic leaves you feeling like you have all the knowledge, but zero access to the actual capital required to deploy it.
Which is exactly why we are jumping into this deep dive today. We're pulling from a really fascinating source. It's called The First Time Investor's Guide to Real Estate Funding.
Published by Ray Axis Inc.
Exactly. And our mission today is to entirely demystify the financial mechanics of real estate investing for beginners. We're going to break down exactly how you can get your hands on elite institutional grade leverage without having a recent track record.
Because that gap, right, that gap between knowing the theory and accessing the leverage, that is where most aspiring investors just give up entirely.
Okay, let's unpack this, because it really feels like a classic catch-22. I mean, lenders want you to have experience before they give you money, but you absolutely need their money to get the experience in the first place.
Yeah, the whole system feels rigged against the newcomer.
It does.
It definitely feels that way from the outside. And that is why studying this specific source material is so incredibly valuable. We aren't looking at some watered-down, predatory starter program with terrible rates.
Right.
The goal today is to understand the very strict, very intentional frameworks that actually allow an institutional lender to offer up to 90% leverage to someone who has literally 0 deals under their belt.
Which sounds crazy.
It does, but there is a deep underlying logic to it. And once you understand their logic, you can use it to build your own portfolio.
All right, well, let's jump right into the deep end with the active strategy, the fix and flip.
The classic rehab loan.
Yeah, this is what everyone sees on television. But looking at the numbers from Ray Axis, I have to push back a little here.
Okay, go for it.
So, giving a beginner, even one with a 740 FICO score, giving them up to 90% of the purchase price and 100% of the construction cost to just tear apart a house, isn't that essentially handing a teenager the keys to a Ferrari?
That's a good analogy.
I mean, it sounds insanely risky for the lender to front that much cash to someone who has, never swung a hammer professionally.
Well, what's fascinating here is how that specific risk is actively managed and mitigated behind the scenes. They aren't handing over the keys to a Ferrari.
You aren't?
No, they're handing over the keys to a very reliable, physically speed-limited sedan. And they achieve this through what they call light rehab guardrails.
Okay, so they're forcing you to stay in the shallow end of the pool for that first project.
Precisely. As a beginner, the lender restricts you entirely to cosmetic updates. We are talking paint, flooring, updating cabinets in kitchens and bathrooms, maybe some basic landscaping to improve curb appeal.
Wait, let me make sure I'm getting this. That means no knocking down load-bearing walls just to get that, open concept floor plan everyone talks about.
Absolutely not. 0.
Wow.
No major square footage additions, no converting a garage into a living space, and mathematically, your construction budget absolutely must be under 50% of the total project costs.
I can see the logic there, but why are they so terrified of structural changes? If it adds value to the home, shouldn't the lender want that?
It comes down to bureaucratic and timeline risk.
Oh, permits.
Exactly. Structural changes require city permits, structural engineers, specialized inspections. For a beginner, navigating the municipal permit office can add months of delays. And as we know, time kills returns.
Yeah, holding costs will eat you alive.
Plus, opening up walls exposes you to unforeseen foundational or plumbing issues that can just blow up your budget. The lender is protecting their capital by basically protecting you from the cascading nightmare of a heavy structural rehab.
That makes total sense, actually.
Yeah.
So if you do want to do a heavy rehab, which this guide defines as a construction budget over $250,000, or a budget that eats up more than 50% of the total costs, how do you get there?
You have to prove yourself in the cosmetic tier first. You need at least 4 completed projects to unlock those heavy rehab funds.
4 projects.
Yeah. And if your ultimate goal is ground-up construction, where you are pouring a brand new foundation, you need 4 to 5 completed deals. Keeping the first deal purely cosmetic and manageable is just smart risk assessment.
And as long as you stay within those safety rails, the metrics are staggering. I mean, from what I'm seeing, they offer loan amounts from $100,000 all the way up to $3.5 million.
Right.
Terms range from 6 to 24 months. And the leverage they will fund up to 90% of your purchase price, plus 100% of that cosmetic rehab budget, capped at a maximum of 90% of your total project costs.
Which is the perfect incubator for building up your initial capital base.
Yeah.
But as any experienced investor will tell you, flipping houses isn't truly investing. It's essentially a very stressful, highly taxed, active day job.
Right. You stop flipping, the income stops flowing. I'm looking at these flipping metrics, and it makes me wonder, what happens when the investor is just tired of managing contractors? What if your ultimate goal is passive income and long-term wealth?
Then you transition to the buy and hold strategy.
Right. And this is where the source guide pivots to DSCR rental loans. These are designed for turnkey single-family homes, duplexes, or small multifamily properties.
Yes, the long-term play.
But I noticed something interesting in the guidelines for beginners. I call it the 5% beginner tax. How severe is that penalty, really?
It's remarkably minor when you look at the landscape of commercial lending. I mean, to get access to the exact same rates, the same loan products, and the same dedicated underwriting team as a seasoned professional who owns 50 houses,
Yeah.
a beginner simply faces a 5% reduction in their loan-to-value, or LTV.
Let's put some hard numbers to that so we can visualize the difference.
Sure. So for a standard purchase or a rate term refinance, a pro might be allowed to borrow up to 80% LTV. A beginner is capped at 75%.
Good, it's not bad.
Right. And if you are doing a cash out refinance, a pro gets 75% LTV and a beginner is capped at 70%. That slight reduction in leverage is basically the only difference.
Which honestly feels incredibly democratic. They aren't gouging you on the interest rate. They just want a slightly thicker equity cushion in the property.
Exactly.
But we should definitely take a step back and explain the acronym here. What actually is a DSCR loan? Because for a lot of W-2 employees, this concept is like the magic key to building a portfolio.
It stands for debt service coverage ratio. Look, when you go to buy a primary residence to live in, the local bank scrutinizes your personal W-2s, your pay stubs, your car loans. They are obsessed with your personal debt-to-income ratio.
Because you are the one paying the mortgage out of your salary.
But with a DSCR loan, the lender is evaluating the property's income potential, not your personal W-2 income.
Right.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this is exactly how real estate investors decouple their personal finances from their investing potential. You could theoretically make $50,000 a year at your day job and still be approved to buy a $2 million apartment building.
As long as the building pays for itself.
Exactly, provided the building's rental income fully covers its own debt obligations.
That is a massive mental shift for anyone used to traditional consumer finance. You are underwriting the asset. You aren't underwriting the human being.
Yeah, it changes everything.
Although the guide does list a couple of strict exclusions for beginners using this product. Right out of the gate, you cannot cross-collateralize, meaning you cannot bundle multiple properties together onto one single loan note. Why is that such a big deal?
Cross-collateralization creates an incredibly complex web of liability. If you have 5 houses on one loan and one tenant stops paying, or, one property suffers a massive fire.
That sounds like a mess.
It is. The lender has a very difficult time disentangling the performing assets from the failing one in the event of a default. They want your first deal totally isolated, one property, one note.
That isolates the risk perfectly. The other big exclusion I saw, No short-term rentals, like Airbnbs right out of the gate for new purchases.
That goes back to volatility. Short-term rentals are essentially hospitality businesses, not traditional housing.
Yeah.
The income fluctuates wildly based on seasons and tourism.
Yeah, you have good months and really bad months.
Right. For your first outing, the lender wants to see stabilized, predictable long-term leases. Though the source does note that if you already have a 12-month operating history showing consistent income on a short-term rental, they will allow you to refinance it using this DSCR program.
Okay, so we know what the products are and we understand the structural guardrails. But understanding a loan product, in theory, is very different from getting an underwriter to actually approve your specific deal.
Oh, absolutely.
We have to dive into the math.
This is where theory turns into actual underwriting.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because the guide lays out something called the 3-metric rule for fix and flips. I want to try a different way of visualizing this.
Okay.
Instead of a standard checklist, imagine a system of 3 progressively smaller funnels. You pour your total loan request through the top funnel, but whichever funnel is the tightest, whether it's based on your purchase price, your construction cost, or the final value, is going to restrict the final drops of cash you actually receive.
That's a highly accurate way to look at it. Let's walk through those 3 funnels.
The first funnel is the LTP, the loan to purchase. The absolute maximum width of this funnel is 90%. So if you are buying a distressed property for $200,000, the maximum the lender lets through that funnel is $180,000 for the acquisition.
Straightforward enough. But then you hit the second funnel, which is the LTC, or loan to cost.
Okay.
This also has a 90% maximum cap. Let's take that same $200,000 house, but you've determined you need a $60,000 cosmetic rehab budget.
So total project cost is $260,000.
Right. 90% of that total cost is $234,000. That means they will fund the $180,000 for the purchase, and they cover 100% of that $60,000 rehab, bringing you right to that $234,000 cap.
That honestly sounds fantastic on paper. You're getting the house and the rehab fully funded up to that limit, but then you hit the third funnel, and this one seems like the ultimate deal breaker, the LTRV, or loan to after repair value.
Yeah, this is the hard ceiling. Your total loan amount can never exceed 75% of what the property will be worth once the rehab is completely finished.
Why are they so rigid about that 75% number?
Because that after repair value represents the lender's ultimate collateral. If you abandon the project halfway through or, the market just dips, the lender needs a built-in 25% equity cushion to sell the property and recoup their capital.
Ah, I see.
It forces the deal, to be honest. If you are buying a house that simply won't be worth much more after you fix it, the 75% LTIRV rule is going to severely slash your approved loan amount, forcing you to bring way more cash to the closing table.
Let's actually test this. Let's do a real-world reverse engineering example, because I know this is how professional underwriters evaluate a file. Let's say a listener wants to guarantee themselves a 20% profit margin on their very first flip.
Okay. You find a property, you look at the neighborhood comparable sales, and you determine your target after repair value. Your ARV is going to be exactly $300,000.
So $300,000 is our absolute finish line.
Right. To mathematically hit a 20% profit on a $300,000 house, your total all-in cost limit cannot exceed $250,000.
Okay.
You subtract your cosmetic rehab budget. Let's say you got bids for $50,000. That leaves you with $200,000.
Wait, I can't just offer $200,000 to the seller, though. Right.
Yeah.
Because I still have closing costs and holding costs like property taxes and insurance while I do the construction for 3 months.
Exactly. You have to account for the carrying costs. The source estimates you need to reserve roughly $35,000 for those holding and closing expenses. So you subtract that $35,000 from the $200,000.
Which leaves you with $165,000.
Yes. That specific number, $165,000, is your absolute maximum allowable purchase price. If the seller demands $175,000, you have to walk away.
Wow, it just completely removes human emotion from the equation. You aren't falling in love with a property, you're just letting the math dictate the offer.
Exactly.
And the math appears to be just as strict on the buy and hold side. For those DSCR rental loans we talked about, the guide highlights 2 golden questions you have to satisfy.
Yes. The first golden question is a reality check. Can you actually afford the cash to close?
Because we need to be clear, 100% financing does not exist in this tier.
Definitely not.
If you buy a $300,000 turnkey rental at that 75% LTV beginner rate, you need to bring a 25% down payment. That's $75,000 cash.
Right.
Plus, you'll need about $5,000 to $8,000 in closing costs. And the lender requires you to have a few months of mortgage payments saved up in reserves just in case a tenant leaves, say, $4,000 to $6,000. So to buy that $300,000 house, you need roughly $85,000 to $90,000 in liquid cash ready to go.
Which leads directly to the second golden question. Does the rent actually cover the mortgage? This is where we calculate that DSCR metric. The formula itself is very straightforward. You take the gross monthly rent and you divide it by the monthly PITIA.
Let's break that acronym down for anyone taking notes. PITI stands for principal, interest, taxes, insurance, and any HOA fees. It's the absolute full monthly carrying cost of owning that property.
Precisely. Let's run a scenario. You buy a rental property for $250,000. You put your 25% down, which is $62,500. Your remaining loan balance is $187,500.
Okay.
Let's assume an interest rate environment that puts your full pay-TO payment at roughly $1,623 a month.
Okay, so my monthly break-even point is $1,623. I have to make at least that much just to keep the lights on.
Now, you analyze the market rent for that street. If you can confidently rent that house for $1,850 a month, you divide $1,850 by your $1,623 payment. That gives you a DSCR of 1.14x.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, since the number is over 1.0, it means the property produces more income than it consumes. That is a healthy cash flowing deal and lenders will happily fund it.
But what if I miscalculated the neighborhood? Like, what if the market rent is only $1,400 a month?
Then you divide $1,400 by your $1,623 payment. Your DSCR drops to 0.86x. The rent objectively does not cover the mortgage.
Does the underwriter just automatically stamp rejected on that file?
Actually, no, and this is a crucial detail in the guide. According to RayAxis, a 0.86x is still fundable because their minimum allowable DSCR is 0.75x.
Wait, hold on. Let me make sure I'm understanding this. Why would a lender intentionally fund a property that bleeds money every single month?
Because they assume you are treating it as a long-term appreciation play, or you plan to raise rents eventually. However, they don't take that risk for free. There is a penalty.
There's always a catch.
Always. If your DSCR drops under 1.0, they will mandate 6 months of cash reserves instead of the usual 3 months. They want to see that you personally have the liquid capital to cover that monthly shortfall for half a year without defaulting.
You are basically feeding the property out of your own savings account, which sounds like a terrible place to be for a beginner.
It is generally not recommended for your very first deal, but, the flexibility is there if you have a specific strategic reason for buying it.
Okay, so we've dissected the loan products, and we've run the gauntlet on the math. Now we really need to talk about infrastructure.
Yeah.
How do you practically set this up? Because reading through the guide, it's pretty clear you can't just call up RayAxis and say, hey, I'd like a loan in my personal name, please.
No, absolutely not. Commercial and investment lenders require you to operate like a legitimate business.
I saw they mandate something called an SPV LLC for each individual project. That's a special purpose vehicle. Can you explain how that actually functions?
Think of an SPV LLC as a legal quarantine zone. You set up a unique LLC that holds absolutely nothing except that single specific property.
Okay.
If a contractor slips and falls on the driveway of property A and decides to sue, the quarantine zone ensures that lawsuit cannot attach lands to your personal residence or to the equity sitting in property B. It isolates your liability, and just as importantly, it isolates the lender's collateral from outside interference.
That is a brilliant way to structure it. And speaking of structure, they have very specific rules about where your liquid cash comes from. The guide mentions they verify your liquidity by reviewing 2 months of bank statements.
Standard practice.
But a fascinating nuance I noticed. Your 401k or IRA retirement accounts can actually count toward your liquidity requirement at 60% of their total value. Gift funds from family can cover up to 50% of the capital you need. But they explicitly state that HELOC 8's home equity lines of credit do not count at all. Why are they so anti-HELOC 8s?
Because a HELOC 8 is callable debt. If the broader real estate market crashes, the bank holding your ELOC can suddenly freeze that line of credit.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the lender doesn't want you funding a project with a shadow loan that could vanish overnight, leaving you stranded mid-renovation with absolutely no cash. They want to see stable, unencumbered capital.
That makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
They want real equity, not a house of cards built on stacked debt.
Right.
And once you have your entity established and your cash verified, the actual execution process they outline is shockingly modern. It's a completely digital portal. Zero handoffs, meaning the loan officer you consult with on day one is the exact same person who guides you to the closing table.
And they handle the valuations and title work internally, which drastically condenses the timeline compared to a traditional bank.
My absolute favorite detail in the entire guide is about property inspections. If a property has limited access, say there's an uncooperative tenant living there, and getting an appraiser inside is just a nightmare. The lender can sometimes send a secure link directly to your smartphone.
Yeah, it's amazing.
You literally take your own geolocation stamped photos of the property, and that serves as the sole inspection needed for funding. That level of flexibility is wild.
It's a system built entirely for speed and efficiency. But this raises an important question. What happens next? You execute your first deal, you use the portal, the project is a success. How do you graduate from being a beginner and shake off that 5% penalty?
Exactly. How do we unlock the pro tier?
RayAxis provides a very clear scaling matrix. To achieve experienced investor status for the DSCR rental loans, you need to have owned 2 or more properties for at least 12 months within the last 3 years. And crucially, at least one of them must be actively income producing.
So, acquire 2 properties and survive a single calendar year.
Yes. Once you cross that threshold, your maximum LTV jumps up to 80% on purchases. To put that in perspective, if you are buying a $400,000 property, graduate into that 80% tier scales your required down payment from $100,000 down to $80,000.
Oh, nice.
You instantly keep an extra $20,000 of liquidity in your own pocket to use on the next deal.
And what about the flippers? How do they scale?
The rehab escalation is based strictly on your volume of completed deals. We already mentioned that 4 completed projects unlocks the heavy structural rehabs. But once you hit 6 completed projects, you unlock 90% loan-to-cost on budgets up to $500,000. And when you hit 8 completed projects, you graduate into Tier 1 pricing, which permanently shaves a 0.25% discount off your base interest rate.
It creates this beautiful snowball effect. Every single deal you successfully close literally makes the next deal cheaper and easier to fund.
It does, but there is a massive pro tip embedded in the guide that beginners simply cannot ignore if they want to reach those tiers. You must aggressively document everything.
You need a flawless paper trail.
Yes. Closing disclosures, HUD settlement statements, time-stamped before and after photos, detailed contractor invoices, signed lease agreements. You have to digitize and save it all from day one. That administrative paperwork is the actual key that unlocks the higher leverage tiers. Lenders will never just take your word for it that you successfully flipped a house in 2024.
Right, you can't just say, trust me.
You have to prove it definitively. Oh, and you must ensure any recycled capital or cash out proceeds season in a standard bank account for at least 60 days before you try to deploy them into your next deal.
Seasoning. Just letting the money sit completely still for 2 months. I assume that's to prove to the underwriter that the cash is actually yours and not, a short-term personal loan you took from a buddy over the weekend.
Exactly. It proves financial stability.
So what does this all mean? If we take a step back and look at everything we've synthesized from this RayAxis guide, it means that a lack of recent experience is no longer a valid excuse to sit on the sidelines and watch other people build wealth.
The capital is absolutely waiting for you.
It is sitting right there. If you are willing to play by their rules, if you respect the safety guardrails of light cosmetic rehabs, and if you submit to the strict, emotionless math of the DSCR formulas, institutional-grade leverage is available to you today.
It really is.
If you've been waiting for the green light to start your portfolio, this is it. You can literally go to rayaxis.com or call them at 678-956-7977 to get pre-qualified and see exactly where you stand.
And if I can leave you with one final thought, something to really chew on as you evaluate taking that next step. We spent a significant amount of time today dissecting those strict underwriting guidelines. The 75% hard ceiling on the after repair value, the specific 1.0 debt service coverage ratios.
Yeah.
It is very easy to look at those metrics when you are hungry for a deal and feel like the lender is holding you back, keeping you from maximizing your potential.
It can definitely feel restrictive, especially when you think you've found a hidden gem of a property.
But you shouldn't view it as a restriction. Those guidelines are forced financial discipline. When you use an institutional lender's math to evaluate your very first deal, you aren't just borrowing their capital. You are borrowing their decades of cold, emotionless risk assessment. You are borrowing millions of data points on exactly what works and exactly what leads to bankruptcy.
It's like having a seasoned mentor sitting on your shoulder, using their brakes on your Ferrari.
Precisely. So the ultimate question isn't just whether you can find a property to buy. The question is, are you ready to let the math, rather than your emotions, dictate your very first real estate purchase?
That is a perfect, sobering place to leave it.